Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Sam Bomarito, and this is the third in my series of video interviews about educational practices. And this morning, I am joined by Missouri's own David Harrison, and he has, wow, such a background, and Dr. Mary Jo Fresch, who, like, oh my gosh, tons of publications and tons of, the academic publications, but also great things for teachers as well. So she's got her feet in both of those ponds. And I should shut up and let you two tell us, please tell us about yourselves. Go ahead.
Mary Jo, genius first.
Oh, well, I've been an educator for over 40 years. I won't tell you how far on that side of 40 I am. I started out as a third grade teacher. Had a lot of struggling readers in my classroom, so got a master's in reading supervision specialist. I ended up working with adults with literacy issues, eventually traveled around to different states, Nebraska, Ohio, Australia for 3 years, back to Ohio, got my PhD in literacy, and taught in teacher education for 20 years at Ohio State University, retired there in 2015. But I am still actively writing. I go into classrooms and I am doing consulting around the country. Anything literacy related, I love. So, and I have 5 grandchildren that are in grades 5, 3, 2, 1. So early literacy is, really my thing, and I'm having a ball with them because they're all in town. So it's great. A little less so now with COVID, but we're still getting together now and again outside. So.
Okay, before I turn it over to David, I'll see your 5 grandchildren and raise you by 2.
Okay.
7. Okay, David, take over.
Well, I prepared for my career as a writer with a great deal of forethought. My undergraduate degree was in zoology with a minor in geology. And my master's degree at Emory University was, the undergraduate was at Drury in Springfield, Missouri. And the master's was at Emory University in Atlanta, where I continued to pursue my career as a writer by doing a master's degree in parasitology. Now, that's the study of parasites. And I studied a parasite found, a tapeworm found only in rats. Now, continuing with this train of thought, I went to Evansville, Indiana, and I took a job as a pharmacologist in a laboratory for Mead Johnson, which, as you know, of course, is what you do in the laboratory. You work on laboratory animals to try to find the next breakthrough in some sort of medication. And I studied the brain and spinal cord. Are you following me so far? Because this is so obvious, but I'm just going to go through this anyway. Wow. So I eventually left science and I went to Hallmark Cards in Kansas City, where over time I became the editorial manager for Hallmark Cards. So I was the guy who said yes or no to all the sentiments on all the greeting cards that Hallmark published for a number of years. And I thought I was pretty close now to having this thing under control. So I moved back home to Springfield and I took over my family business. My dad started in 1945. It was a concrete block manufacturing company. So I ran Flintstone Block Company for 35 years. And that's how I became a writer. Well, so, Dr. Sam, I really started writing when I was 22 years old, but I was doing that at night and on the side. And so in my spare time over 51 years, I've now had my 100th book published.
Wow. Well, you are genuinely a Renaissance man. And by the way, I now get more explanation for myself about some of the books you've written. So speaking of numbers of books, I know that, let's see, this is the 7th one the two of you have written together, and the 20th one for Mary Jo. Before I go on to what you know is the next question, anything to say about those 7 you've written together?
Well, I will say something. I happen
Sure.
to have them here. I can hold these up. These are, it's a series of 5 books. I'll just go through those covers. Consonants, this is through Shell Education, which is the professional arm of teacher-created materials. And back in the day, I said to David, you know, there just aren't enough poems for young learners, especially those who are developing phonemic and phonological awareness, for teachers to use and say, here's good examples of long A or the CH sound. And you really have to dig long and hard to find a poem with enough of those sounds. So David, would you just write some poems and then I'll write the lessons around it? Didn't that sound simple? Well, it turned into 90 plus poems. The poems are beautiful, and they do show all of the phonemic elements that we're trying to teach across the 5 books. There's the lessons, there's letters for parents, there are cross-curricular lessons as well. There's an art lesson for everything. So we love the arts. And then David and I did, before this one that we're going to talk about today, 7 keys for research, 7 keys to research for writing success. You'd think I'd have these titles memorized. And there in this book, we used what David does as an author to research topics to help students learn how to be better researchers. And then the book we're going to talk about today is, again, using David's text. You know, he's such an extraordinary author in that he writes across genres, but he has so many mentor texts that students can learn from how to make their writing more impactful. And so that's why our writing partnership works so well. David creates these beautiful texts. I write lessons around them and inspire the teachers to use what he does to inspire their students to make their writing more beautiful, more impactful, with better language. So, and then in the earlier books, teaching them how the language works, phonics. There we go.
Okay, David's got his hand up.
Yeah, I want to say something. We do have fun, as you can well see. We make great partners, and I love working with Mary Jo. She knows her stuff. She does what she says she will do. She does it when she says she'll do it. We marshal along and get these things done. But the closest I've come in a long time to panicking was when I said yes. Of course, I'll always say yes to Mary Jo when she proposes an idea. So when she said, David, we need you to write some poems about these phones of rhymes, and I thought she meant RHYME, and she meant RIME, and so I discovered that I was going to be writing poems inspired by a single sound. Now that, friends, is a very big challenge, and I had a wonderful time doing it, but I doubt that there are too many poets out there who've had this experience of starting with basically nothing except just a sound and doing that 96 times.
Wow. Well, as a consumer of both of your books, and I've used them, and for the teachers out there, I'll say this stuff works, guys. Okay, and I'll just also say that there'll be links to all this in the blog. So if any of this caught your eye, they're out there and they're there. But what I really love about poetry is that it does such a strong job of making sure there's comprehension involved. And some of the stuff that's out there, you know, Dan, Fran, Brand, the family, good grief, like zero background of zero comprehension kinds of things, but your stuff it goes well beyond that. So David, one last question here before we move on to the next thing. How many books is it that you've done now?
Well,
is it 100? Did I get that right? This is your 100th book.
Yeah.
Could you say something about how you feel on your 100th book?
Well, I feel pretty good, Dr. Sam. I've had a good year in spite of the pandemic and all the rest of the unhappiness and divisiveness and so forth. I've actually had 4 books published this year, and that I think is a record for me. The numbers 97, 8, 9, and 100, and this one with Mary Jo is the 100th book. Now, I began to sort of count down toward this a number of years ago, because in 51 years, well, 51 years, 100 books, that's, 2 books a year would be my average. And so that takes 5 years ago or so, I began looking toward this time, and I thought I would never get here, but it did. And in a year when people like Mary Jo and I can't get out and attend conferences and do book signings and all the rest of it, we rely on opportunities like you're giving us now. Thank you again, sir, to talk about our wares and make sure that at least a few people know about what we've been up to. And I'm just extremely proud of number 100. I'm proud of it not because it's a milestone number, but because it's just a darn good book.
Okay, thank you. And seriously, on behalf of everybody in the literacy world, thank you for everything you've done and the two of you together have done. Now, time to move on. Mary Jo and David, tell us about what teachers can expect to find in this, the 5 middle chapters of this book. Let us know about the title of the book, maybe, and how they can use these chapters in lessons. So I think David and Mary Jo are going to take over, and they're going to take over my screen. So goodbye, everybody. Mary Jo's going to share screen, and I'm going to leave. It's been nice seeing you. Okay, here we go. Share screen.
All right, here we go. And hopefully that looks right. Yeah. So this is the cover of the book. Dr. Sam, you're getting the scoop on this. We don't even have them in our hands yet. They just hit the warehouse. They are available now through NCT. They've been doing a pre-sale on it, but we don't even have physical copies yet. That's how far ahead of the curve you are.
All right.
Look at you.
It's a scoop. It's a scoop. I got a scoop at last.
Got a scoop. We just love this cover. It's bright. It's colorful. I think it reflects us. Then the little Post-its there are all of the different categories of vocabulary that the students are going to be looking at. And I'll show you the table of contents in a minute. Similes, metaphors, idioms, figurative language, word origins, and NIMS. And we'll get into that with this table of contents. Of course, we have the first chapter that gives them some background information and what they need to know about vocabulary teaching. But the NIMS are names, because that's what NIMS stands for. So we get into acronyms, antonyms, eponyms, homonyms, synonyms, retronyms, and I'm going to just put that out there. If you don't know what a retronym is, that's your homework after you get off of this.
Okay, I'll look it up and find out.
You have to go look it up. Once students discover these, they go crazy for them. I will just tell you that. So we have all the NIM categories. We get into similes and metaphors. We get into idioms. These are particularly useful to help our English language learners because they're kind of mysterious. They don't stand for what all the words in the, we know that, it's not literally raining cats and dogs. We get into shades of meaning and word origins, which students love the word origin stories. And actually, I've done those all the way down into kindergarten. It's amazing to learn the history of a word. It makes it so memorable. And then David will talk about chapter 6, but we have the lessons in there. There's lots of lesson resources and lots of electronic resources for teachers, students, and especially for and about our ELL students. This is an example of a lesson. And David can talk a little bit about the narrative he used to inspire students to expand what they wrote. So he has one called a witch narrative. He can talk a little bit about that. And then the lesson tells them what to do, where to go back to. This actually is the one that two students did together, where we say, look, this is kind of boring. Let's get some more imaginative, colorful language in, and they've done a really good job. I will tell you, I had to pull these off of the typeset pages that were sent to us because, again, I don't have anything to photocopy because you are so far ahead of the curve. These are lessons that are in the back then that teachers can photocopy. They can actually send them. So when we talk a little bit later about hybrid online teaching, the back of the book, this first appendix is just full of things that teachers can use in class or virtually. So this is one with the word origins. When we understand what the root of a word is, then we can often discern the meaning of words with that root in there. Did you know disaster meant that people used to think that if you had a disaster, you were under a bad star? So that's where the word disaster comes from. You had a bad star. And I will stop sharing that little bit for David to talk a little bit more, and we can come back to that.
Well, I want to tell you, before this pandemic closed everything down, and Mary Jo and I were very much involved in writing the book. We wanted some feedback from classrooms, from teachers and their kids. So I had the opportunity to go into some schools at that time and play with these ideas. And I would show kids some of these NIMS and play with what I had written and what Mary Jo had suggested as a classroom activity for the teacher to follow up. And they just loved them. The kids laughed. They wanted me to tell them more. The teachers wrote follow-up notes and said, "This is fantastic. Thank you guys for what you're doing. It's gonna fill a real need for us." So we really felt good about it, even while we were in the process of doing the book, writing the book. And teachers are in the book because they wanted to be and wanted to help and offer their examples of what happened when they took these ideas to their kids. In the case of the witch story that Mary Jo referred to, I took it really from a book I did for Rand McNally decades ago about a witch. It was a witch book, and I did a couple of stories for that book. So I just took an old, well-published story about a witch who flies around in the clouds. That's a bad storm. She's shrieking and doing rolls on her broom, and she winds up getting hit by a plane. She falls to the ground, and they put her in the hospital, and nobody knows what to do with her anyway. So I took that and wrote backwards. I took all the good stuff away and just got down to simple declarative statements. And that's what we started. So Mary Jo presented that in the book. And then we went back the other way and said, okay, what can we do to make this more interesting? And so in the end, I introduced them to the original story, but we start with a basic idea of that story and go forward.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, I'm looking at where I should be here. Have you done your explanation yet? Or were you going to do quotes from final chapters and an explanation of what teachers might do with your final chapter? If that's where we are, David, take it away.
Well, yeah, and Mary Jo can put the slides up. But before you do, Mary Jo, I have a lot of friends in the business. And so we leaned on some of those good people to lend us their ideas about how they write, these are pros, names you know. And so we would ask them, how do you go about it? How do you make your writing so interesting? Why do kids want to read what you write? And they gave us some wonderful answers. And I think we have 8 people. They include a couple of former United States Children's Poet Laureates. Jane Yolen is on there, Nikki Grimes is on there. Well, it's just a who's who. And so that alone adds a great deal of value to the book. So Mary Jo, I took 3 just short excerpts from among them. And so Nikki Grimes says, the challenge is to tell our stories, painting mental pictures, but use as few words as possible. I'm sorry about my phone. I can't answer it. I can't get to it. So there, somebody trying to sell me something, I'm quite sure. But anyway, Nikki says every word counts. And that's what we tell the kids. Because every word counts, they also need to be the best words and the most interesting words and the strongest nouns and the most fun verbs and so on. And then we get into all these NIMS and how to use them, the parts of speech and the metaphors and the similes. So that was, Nikki is telling us in her own way what we're trying to tell the kids. So we loved that quote from Nikki. Obert Sky is one of the most creative writers I know. He writes young adult, I'm sorry, he writes middle grade novels. And he has this incredible way of using the language. So I was delighted when he agreed to say something for us. And he said, well, when he was a kid, his parents never said things the normal way. Instead of saying, how was school today? His dad would say something like, did you solve any mysteries today? And he fell and broke his arm one time in 3 places, and his mother didn't tell people my son Robert broke his arm. She told people his bones were just trying to be creative. So is it any wonder that Obert, who's actually Robert, grew up to be such a wordsmith? Well, he's always looking for an interesting way of wording what he wants to say. And that's the message from him to our teachers and to our kids who get to listen to this and practice what Obert preaches. And here's Jane Yolen. Jane and I have a book that just came out a few weeks ago, Rum Pum Pum, picture book. And she was telling me about, or us, about the time she was writing about a moon. And I don't know if it's the owl's moon or what moon it was, but she was trying to describe the moon. It was a winter night, snow on the ground. And she didn't want to use balloon because that was trite, that was old, been done too much. So she finally just went for a walk in the night with crunching snow beneath her feet and maybe an owl someplace. And another word came to her mind, hullabaloo, a good old-fashioned word that sort of referred to the general nature of the evening. And then it hit her. This moon was a hullabalooning, and it was just perfect. So there's another example of looking until you find just the right way of describing and using the words to make it just what you want to say. And so we were very beholden to Jane Yolen for that bit of wisdom.
You know, thankfully, David has all these wonderfully talented, well-known friends that he could ask, and no one said no. So I do think teachers can use these. You know, you're standing in line, it's not quite time to get out there to lunch or get, waiting for whatever, or even some time if you're online, you have just a snippet of time that you want to do something kind of community focused. And teachers could read one of these authors. Hey, we just read David and Jane's book, Rum Pum Pum. Now, why don't we read about how Jane wordsmiths? How does she come up with some of that? And of course, throughout the book, they're going to get what David does. And I think what we've tried really hard in the book to do is scaffold all those lessons. So they're building, so that they don't start out, embellishing simple sentences, but we kind of stage it so they scaffold off of them and create. There's 40 some lessons. There's, oh gosh, I don't even remember how many independent lessons. So there's enough, I think all over there's 70 some lessons that teachers can use out of this book. Some of them are independent, and a lot of them they would be able to use either hybrid or online. But I think that they would enjoy hearing that students, if you've read a Nikki Grimes book, and then you read how she thinks about the language, I think it's something to make students be even more in love with reading. And that's what we're always about too, right?
Yeah, and we also, we didn't have time or space, but Larry Dane Bremner, Ken Nesbitt, Margarita Engel, Charles Ginya, and Janet Wong are others who are in this book. So it's a who's who, and that, as I say, that alone is worth something for the teacher to present to her or share with his or her children what these great writers have to say.
Okay. Well, this particular potential consumer of your book, mouth is watering at this point. I just can't wait to get a hold of a copy. And by the way, 2 things come to mind. Mark Twain once said the difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between lightning and the lightning bug. Okay, so wow, you got to put in a plug for the favorite son, right? And also, one of the things as a workshop teacher I learned was that you need to teach kids to learn to read like writers. And man, David, it just sounds like that's exactly what you're doing. So, and I'm going to use that as a segue to let you finish up, and then Mary Jo can move into talking how to use this book with distance learning. But David, any last words before Mary Jo takes over?
Well, not really. I think we've covered it pretty well, and Mary Jo will summarize. But she said, this is our 7th book together. I've done half a dozen others with other people. I had one with Laura Robb come out just a few weeks ago, and Laura and I are in the process right now of doing this same sort of thing, helping people, trying to get people more aware of what we have done. So I've had a wonderful year. This is a good time for us, and Dr. Sam, I want to thank you personally for having us on your blog today, and you're very, very generous, and we appreciate that. So, Mary Jo.
We do appreciate it.
Okay, Mary Jo, anything to say about distance learning, or are we wrapping it up here?
Well, I just real quick, and then we can wrap. I do think that there are so many fantastic lessons in here for, whether you're doing it virtually, hybrid, or if you're in class. There's so many of them that just lend themselves to working on the screen with students and getting them inspired. And the materials, are in the back of the book, so teachers will have at ready, at the beginning of the lesson, it says you're going to need scissors and glue, and it's that kind of a helpful planning. Like, you can grab one of those lessons and go with it. And there's all of them, there's only a couple of them that they would be doing with a small group, but teachers who do the breakout rooms know how to do that, would be able to transfer those into breakout room activities. So it's got a wide range of use, and it would make language exploration exciting for kids, and that's what we really want them to get excited. It's not only about building the language, but using the language, really feeling like they have command of some more interesting ways to express what they're feeling. And I think we're seeing people do more writing now, because students, I know my grandchildren are doing much more writing assignments than they were getting in school because they're at home. And so I'm enjoying reading those. But I think it's fun that the children now have more opportunity to use more interesting language. And David has provided them with such fantastic mentor texts. They can only be inspired by reading what he gives them.
Okay, well, wow, this has been amazing. I'm going to basically say almost goodbye, but give you a chance to say any last minute goodbyes. And then maybe we can end all this with a Zoom wave. That's the new wave of the, bye everybody. So before anything to say before we do our Zoom wave and wrap this up?
Okay. I'm just ready. I'm ready to wave.
Okay, well, in that case, goodbye. Bye-bye. And teachers, all the links to get to that you need, including the links to pre-order this book, will be in the blog. So this is Dr. B signing off.